Most dating advice focuses on younger women, how to attract them, what they want, how they think in their 20s and early 30s, when the dating market is at its most active. But there's an entire population of women that rarely gets discussed with any real depth. Women over 40. And understanding what drives them is completely different from understanding younger women. Because here's the thing, by 40 a woman has lived. She's accumulated experiences, disappointments, wounds, and wisdom. She's not operating from the same place as a 25-year-old who's still figuring out what she wants. She knows what she wants. Or at least she knows what she needs, even if she describes it differently. Today we're going to talk about what women after 40 are actually chasing. Not what they say they want, but what's really driving their choices. This isn't about judgment. It's about pattern recognition. Because when you understand what someone truly needs, you understand how they'll behave. The first thing to understand is that attraction changes as women age. Not just in terms of what they're attracted to, but in terms of what's driving the attraction itself. In her 20s, a woman's dating life is often driven by chemistry, excitement, social dynamics, future potential. She's thinking about who gives her butterflies, who her friends approve of, who fits the vision she has for her life. By 40, something has shifted. The drive has become more psychological, less about excitement, more about filling gaps, less about building a future, more about addressing what's missing in the present. This isn't a criticism, it's just reality. Life accumulates, disappointments accumulate, unmet needs accumulate, and by 40, those accumulated needs start driving behavior in ways that weren't present at 25. The question isn't what does she find attractive? The question becomes what is she hungry for? And that hunger takes different forms depending on her particular history and psychology. The first pattern you'll encounter is the woman chasing validation. In her younger years, she received a certain kind of attention. Heads turned when she walked into rooms. Men approached, compliments flowed freely. Her appearance was currency, and she had plenty of it. Aging changes that equation. The attention diminishes. The heads turn less often. She finds herself competing for attention she once received effortlessly. And the competition includes women 20 years younger. This creates an internal crisis. If her identity was built on being desired, what happens when that desire becomes less automatic? If her confidence came from external validation, what happens when that validation becomes scarce? What she's chasing now isn't really a relationship. It's proof that she still has value, proof that she's still desirable, proof that time hasn't taken away what she once had. You'll notice she responds powerfully to compliments, but not the obvious ones. Telling her she's beautiful might feel hollow because she's comparing herself to her younger self. But complimenting her intelligence, her taste, her sophistication, these land differently because they suggest value that isn't fading. The validation seeker isn't necessarily looking for love. She's looking for evidence that she still matters, and she'll attach quickly to anyone who provides that evidence consistently. Watch how she behaves on social media. Notice how she responds when other women get attention. Pay attention to the comparison she makes, to younger women, to her past self, to friends who seem to be aging better. The validation seeker is locked in a competition she can't win, and the anxiety of that competition drives her behavior. Nostalgia becomes her coping mechanism. She'll reference her younger years frequently, pull out old photos, talk about how things used to be. This isn't just reminiscing. It's her way of staying connected to a version of herself that felt more valuable. The second pattern is the woman carrying deep emotional wounds. She's been betrayed, abandoned, disappointed repeatedly by men who promised things they didn't deliver. Maybe a husband left her for someone younger. Or maybe a long-term partner cheated. Maybe she's experienced a pattern of relationships that started well and ended painfully. What she's chasing isn't excitement or passion, it's safety, protection, someone who feels stable and trustworthy in a way the men before weren't. She attaches quickly to men who provide emotional shelter. Not necessarily the most attractive or exciting men, but the ones who make her feel secure. The ones who show up consistently. The ones who don't trigger her trauma responses. Here's what's important to understand. She often confuses gratitude for love. The relief of finally feeling safe gets interpreted as deep connection. The absence of anxiety gets mistaken for the presence of passion. This creates a pattern. She bonds intensely with whoever provides safety, but once that safety is established, Once she's healed enough that the wound isn't actively bleeding, the gratitude that felt like love can start to fade. She realizes she attached out of need rather than genuine connection. The wounded attacher isn't manipulative. She genuinely believes she loves the men she attaches to, but her attachment is driven by protection needs, not romantic desire, and that distinction matters when the need for protection diminishes. You can spot the wounded attacher by how quickly she invests. She moves fast, too fast. She's ready to commit before she really knows you, because commitment means security, and security is what she's desperate for. The intensity that feels flattering at first is actually a warning sign. She's attaching to what you represent, not who you are. If you're the man providing that shelter, understand what you're signing up for. The early phase will feel incredible. She'll be devoted, grateful, present in ways that seem too good to be true. But once her nervous system calms down, once she no longer wakes up afraid, the gratitude that looked like passion may reveal itself as something less. The third pattern is the woman stuck in waiting mode. She spent years, maybe decades, believing that her real life hasn't started yet. That something or someone is coming that will transform everything. That she's in a temporary holding pattern until the thing she's really meant for arrives. This woman might be in relationships, but she treats partners as placeholders. Nice for now, but not the thing she's actually waiting for. She's emotionally available to the possibility of something better, which means she's never fully emotionally available to what's actually in front of her. What she's chasing is transformation, not gradual improvement, dramatic change. The trip that will change her perspective. The man who will unlock something in her. The opportunity that will finally make her life feel real. She's drawn to novelty, adventure, spontaneity. Not because she's genuinely adventurous, but because novelty feeds the fantasy that change is possible. That her real life might finally be starting. The problem is that fantasy is more appealing than reality. The imagined perfect relationship is better than any actual relationship could be. So she keeps waiting, keeps chasing, keeps treating real opportunities as temporary, because the thing she's really waiting for hasn't arrived yet. She's loyal to a fantasy, which makes her disloyal to reality. The fantasy chaser is easy to attract, but almost impossible to keep. She'll be excited by you at first. You're new, you're different. You might be the transformation she's been waiting for. But that excitement has a shelf life. Once you become familiar, once you're part of her actual life rather than her potential life, the magic fades. Temptation is her constant companion, not because she's immoral, but because she's always scanning for the next possibility. The man who texts when she's frustrated, the old flame who reappears, the stranger who represents something her current situation doesn't. She's never fully present because part of her is always waiting for something better. The fourth pattern is the woman who never developed adult self-sufficiency. Her life has been structured around men who handled things. Her father provided, then boyfriends provided, then a husband provided. Someone else always managed the finances, the logistics, the hard decisions. She moved from one provider to the next without ever building the infrastructure of independent adult life. Now, whether through divorce or death or circumstance, she's facing a world. She's not equipped to navigate alone, and she's terrified. What she's chasing is another handler, another man who will take over the parts of life she never learned to manage, another protector provider who will restore the structure she's always lived within. But here's where it gets complicated. She often resents the very dynamic she needs. She chafes against the authority of men because it reminds her of her dependency. She's drawn to romance, drama, and emotional intensity because those feel like freedom from the practical constraints she's trying to escape. She might rebel against a stable, capable man because he feels too much like the father figures or husbands who controlled her life. Even though she's simultaneously desperate for someone to take control, the perpetual dependent wants to be taken care of while also being set free. It's a contradiction she hasn't resolved, and it creates chaos in her relationships. You'll recognize her by the emotional intensity she seeks. She's drawn to drama, to passion, to men who make her feel something powerful. She confuses intensity with love and stability with boredom. The responsible man who could actually help her feels stifling. The exciting man who destabilizes her feels alive. Her life is marked by oscillation, periods of responsible choices followed by impulsive decisions, relationships with stable men that she sabotages, affairs with unsuitable men that she can't resist. She's essentially a teenager in an adult body, capable of adult pleasures, but not adult responsibilities. The fifth pattern is the woman who built her life around professional achievement. She's successful, accomplished, used to being in charge. She spent decades developing the skills required to lead. Decisiveness, assertiveness, control, emotional regulation. These skills served her well in her career. The problem is that dominance patterns don't switch off when she leaves the office. She brings executive mode into her personal life. She manages relationships the way she manages projects. She struggles to yield control because yielding feels like weakness. And weakness isn't something she's allowed herself for a very long time. What she's chasing is complicated. On one level, she wants a partner she can respect. Someone strong enough that she doesn't feel like she's managing him. On another level, she's deeply uncomfortable with not being in control. She craves submission but fears it. She wants to let go but doesn't know how. This creates oscillation. She's drawn to strong men, then finds herself competing with them. She wants to be led, then rebels against leadership when it's offered. She's exhausted by her own dominance, but can't stop exercising it. The career dominant often carries significant tension, emotional, physical, psychological, that she doesn't know how to release. Her armor is too well constructed, and beneath that armor is a woman who desperately wants to be met by someone strong enough to make her feel safe enough to take it off. The tragedy of the career dominant is that what she needs most is what she's least able to accept. She needs to surrender, but surrender requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is exactly what got armored over years ago. She's trapped in her own competence. If you're a man attracted to career-dominant women, understand the paradox you're walking into. She'll test your strength constantly, not because she wants you to fail, but because she needs to know you can handle her before she can consider letting go. Those tests are exhausting, but they're also invitations. The sixth pattern is the woman who has experienced social or financial decline. She once lived in a certain world, a certain neighborhood, a certain social circle, a certain lifestyle. Maybe through marriage, maybe through her own success, maybe through family. But she had access to a level of status that felt like her natural environment. Then something changed. Divorce, financial reversal, loss, and now she's living a life that feels beneath her. Not necessarily poor, but reduced, diminished, humiliating in comparison to what she once had. What she's chasing is restoration, not just money, but the world that money provides access to. The restaurants, the vacations, the social circles, the sense of belonging to something elevated. She's drawn to men who represent that world. Men with visible success as status markers, access to environments she misses. She attaches quickly to anyone who seems like a ticket back to where she belongs. This makes her vulnerable to display. Men who project status, even if that projection is exaggerated or false, trigger her attachment quickly. She wants to believe because belief means hope of return. The status recoverer isn't necessarily materialistic in a shallow sense. She's mourning a lost identity, and she's looking for someone who can give it back to her. You'll notice her discontent with her current circumstances. She speaks about her past in ways that highlight the contrast with her present. She name-drops former connections. She has standards that seem misaligned with her current reality. Not because she's delusional, but because she's measuring against where she was, not where she is. The danger with the status recoverer is that she may be more attracted to what you represent than who you are. If your appeal is largely your status, your success, your access, your lifestyle, understand that you're filling a role that can work, but it's unstable. What happens if your status changes? What happens if someone with more status appears? The seventh pattern is the woman in perpetual motion. She's always doing something. Workshops, retreats, self-development programs, travel, events, new hobbies, new social circles, new philosophies. Her calendar is packed with activity that looks like growth, but functions as distraction. What she's chasing is herself, or rather a version of herself she hopes to discover through enough searching. She believes that the right experience, the right insight, the right breakthrough will finally make her feel complete. In relationships, this creates instability. She's emotionally reactive, easily bored, prone to conflict because conflict creates intensity, and intensity feels like meaning. She cycles through connections quickly, always convinced that the next one might be different. Short-term connection is possible with the chronic searcher, especially if you share her current enthusiasm, validate her current worldview, match her current energy. But long-term stability is almost impossible because stability feels like stagnation to her. She mistakes chaos for self-discovery. She mistakes movement for progress, and she'll keep searching indefinitely because admitting she's found what she's looking for would mean she'd have to stop running. The chronic searcher often has strong opinions about everything: spirituality, diet, politics, relationships. These opinions change frequently, and she holds each one with complete conviction until the next one arrives. This isn't intellectual curiosity. It's identity and stability dressed up as open-mindedness. In relationships, she brings intensity and exhaustion in equal measure. She wants deep conversations at 2 in the morning. She wants you to grow with her, change with her, match her constant evolution. The problem is that her evolution has no destination. She's not becoming something, she's just moving. The 8th pattern is the woman who has hardened into cynical independence. She's been disappointed enough times that she's stopped expecting anything from men. She's built a life that doesn't require a partner. She takes pride in not needing anyone, and that pride has become her identity. The armor is real. She's genuinely tough, often successful in her professional life because that toughness translates well to competitive environments. She can handle difficulty. She can handle being alone. She can handle almost anything. What she can't handle is vulnerability. The armor that protected her from disappointment also prevents genuine intimacy. She doesn't know how to let someone in without feeling like she's losing something. So she finds a workaround: caretaking. She's drawn to men who are younger, less established, struggling in some way. Men she can help, guide, mentor, rescue. This allows her to be in a relationship while maintaining control. She's giving, not receiving. She's strong, they're weak. The power dynamic stays comfortable. The armored caretaker is chasing intimacy through a back door. She wants connection, but can only accept it when she's the one providing it. Caretaking becomes a substitute for vulnerability, and as long as it stays that way, she never has to take the risk of actually being seen. Her romantic history often includes men who needed her, men she helped through difficult times, men who are works in progress. She'll tell you she just happened to attract broken men, but the pattern isn't coincidence. Broken men are safe. They can't threaten her fortress. If you're a capable, stable man attracted to an armored caretaker, understand that your capability is actually a barrier. She doesn't know how to relate to someone she can't fix. Your strength makes her uncomfortable because it removes her excuse for staying in control. Here's what unites all of these patterns: lack. Every woman I've described is missing something. The validation seeker lacks proof of her continued value. The wounded detacher lacks safety. The fantasy chaser lacks a life that feels real. The perpetual dependent lacks capability. The career dominant lacks permission to surrender. The status recoverer lacks her former position. The chronic searcher lacks identity. The armored caretaker lacks the ability to receive. This isn't a criticism. Everyone lacks something. Everyone has unmet needs driving their behavior. This is just how humans work. But here's why it matters for understanding women over 40 specifically. By that age, the lacks have accumulated. The compensations have calcified. The patterns have become entrenched. What might have been a minor tendency at 25 has become a defining characteristic by 45. When you understand what someone lacks, you understand what they're chasing. And when you understand what they're chasing, you understand how they'll behave in dating, in relationships, in conflict, in everything. You can spot the lack if you pay attention. What does she complain about most? What does she talk about wishing she had? What are the recurring themes in her stories of past relationships? What makes her light up? And what makes her defensive? The lack isn't always obvious because most people don't articulate their deepest needs directly. They hint at them. They circle around them. They reveal them through patterns rather than statements. But the lack is always there, driving behavior from underneath. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth. Much of what women over 40 call love is actually need. Not all of it. Genuine love exists at every age, but the patterns I've described produce attachment that looks like love, but is actually something else. The validation seeker attaches to whoever validates her.